This is Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston. This week saw another chapter in the drama of Washington, with the Senate apparently getting closer to a major bipartisan infrastructure package coming on top of over $5 trillion in fiscal stimulus already pumped in the system, and more on the way if Democrats have their way. Leon Cooperman has been a key investor for many years, first at Goldman Sachs and then as head of his own firm, Omega Advisors. And we welcome him now to Wall Street Week. So, Lee, thank you so much for joining us. So many people look to you for investment advice. I've heard you described as a fully invested bear. Could you tell us what that means and why?
Yeah, well, let me first say, it's a pleasure to be with you. I was on with Louis Rukeyser on the initial Wall Street Week 4 or 5 times. This is a lot more convenient. I'm sitting in my home in New Jersey, and I didn't have to travel to Owings Mills, Maryland. So it's a pretty painless experience. Fully invested bear is explained by the fact that it's a cyclical and secular outlook. The cyclical conditions are not suggestive of a bear market. Basically, bear markets don't come about through immaculate conception. They come about for certain fundamental reasons. Number one, accelerating and problematic inflation. We're heading in that direction. We're not there yet, mainly because of the Fed speak. A hostile Fed, which you don't have. In fact, I'm critical of the Fed, and I'll talk about that in a moment. An oncoming recession, we're just coming out of recession, or a exuberantly priced market. And I have to say, even though I'm conservative in my outlook, I have to admit the stock market has been very self-corrective. The area of the market has been most exploited and overvalued has had a very big decline. So cyclically, the conditions for big decline are present, and that explains my positive view. My long-term concerns are, I think we're kind of borrowing from the future. Laura Tyson's a very distinguished economist. I don't know if she's still listening, but I would say if I lined up 100 economists and asked them what is the potential real growth of the U.S. economy, the response would be centered around 2% real. And that's be a function of labor force growth, which is about 0.5% per annum, and productivity growth, which is about 1.5% per annum. So that determines real growth in any economy. So 2% real. If you're an economic bull, you say 2.5. If you're a bear, you say 1.5. Add to that about 2% for inflation. So nominal GDP grows 4%. We have real growth this year of 4 times potential, yet the Fed is holding interest rates near zero. Makes no sense to me. I understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, but I think it's going to have a bad end to it. Secondly, you just referenced it a minute ago. We've already injected into the economy $1 trillion of stimulus in excess of wages lost, yet they're trying to do another 2 or 3 trillion on top of that. And so, this nation was founded 245 years ago. We had no national debt. 3 years ago, it was about 20 trillion. I think now it's knocking the door at 28 trillion. And it's growing at a rate far in excess of the growth rate of the economy. And when this party ends, basically, it's not going to end well. And nobody knows when it's going to end. Socrates around, I think, 400 BC said he was the wisest man alive. For he knows one thing, and that is, I know nothing. And then a few thousand years later, Warren Buffett said, forecasts of the future tell you more about the forecast than they tell you about the future. So we're all guessing, but I think we have a bad end to this. I think we've been borrowing from the future. I think bonds are totally mispriced. If I told you historically the 10-year U.S. government bond is yielded in line with nominal GDP. So let's say nominal GDP on a trend basis grows at 4%. So that would imply a 4% 10-year bond. Okay, this year, I think in the third quarter, nominal GDP is expected to grow at 13%. Yet we have a 1.3% 10-year government bond rate. You're an investor, you pay taxes, you keep 60% of the 1.3. That's 78 basis points, called 80 basis points. The inflation rate is running 4 or 5%. So, stocks make all the sense in the world relative to bonds, but bonds make no sense. And I think the Fed is overstaying their position. And that bothers me greatly. So I also am troubled by the shift to the left that's taking place in the country. 30% of the young people today think socialism is the preferred system to capitalism. They don't have a clue. My good buddy, who I admire greatly, Ken Langone, says it well. He'd like to put a bunch of people on his private plane, fly them to Venezuela, Cuba, and let them see what socialism is all about.
So let me ask you one specific question. If you're putting money to work right now, how do you take into account the fact that some people have said the referee is now playing in the game, whether it's on the monetary policy side or the fiscal policy side? You referred to long-term growth patterns, but thus far the government, and this, by the way, is true under President Trump as well, I could argue, gooses up the nominal growth rate by really intervening.
Absolutely. Trump was no hero. In my opinion, we were running $1 trillion deficit in early 2020. while he was president, and we had a fully employed economy. Well, really, what happened is prior to COVID hitting, the unemployed when there's about 5.5 million people, it ballooned to 23 million people, now at the peak, and now we're down to about 8 million. And we're conducting fiscal monetary policy with the idea of getting unemployment back down to where it was pre-COVID. It's not a worthwhile objective, but I think the combination of very stimulative fiscal monetary policy, it will turn out to be problematic.
So Lee, let me ask you one last question here, which goes to a fundamental issue for our audience, which is historically, the best and the brightest have gone to Wall Street. Is that still true, or is Wall Street struggling to attract the best talent these days because they're going off to other sources, including tech as well as maybe biotech?
I don't know. In all honesty, David, I've always advocated, I do a lot of speaking to young people in high school and colleges, and I tell them the only way to be successful is to do what you love and love what you do. So, don't go into a field to make a lot of money. Go into a field because you have a passion for it. And I think Wall Street's a place where I loved every minute I worked there. I had a great 25-year run at Goldman Sachs, terrific firm. I had a great run at Omega for another 25 years. And then in 2018, I decided to, I tell everybody I'm like Hyman Roth in Godfather 2. I saw the movie 100 times, but there's a scene at the airport right before they shoot him. He professes to be a retired executive living on a pension. I'm a retired money manager living on investment income. The bad news is I have no active income, no wages, no salaries. All my income is dividends and interest. I have enough of it. Don't worry about me. And the good news is I have no pressure. So at age 78, I decided to swap pressure for income. Pressure for income. Less pressure, more income. I like to make money because my goal is to give it away, and I like to have more money to give away. But basically, I love what I'm doing. So Wall Street will get its share of good people, and the legal profession is going to get its share of good people. And money goes where money's treated best. But I think the way to be successful is to go where you have a passion, and and that's kind of what got me to Wall Street. I look at my career and I say, it was luck, hard work, and intuition that made for my success. Luck, hard work, and intuition.
There you go. If we can all be Lee Cooperman, we'd be in good shape. Thank you so much. Really great to have you with us. That's Leon Cooperman of Omega Family Office.